I think that in most of our cultures, we appreciate stories, the telling of stories. Sometimes it's done to tell the story of a people, a certain family. Or we tell stories to talk about a nation. We enjoy telling stories. In my home, my dad was a big storyteller. He loved to tell stories. Of course, I'm from a generation where we did not have television when I was young, and so we were entertained by the stories. Stories was a way of entertaining. My mother told stories, but she told stories from the book, fables. And people have ways of sharing stories, sometimes for entertainment. After dinner, get together and tell stories, and we entertain each other. Sometimes the stories are told to teach a lesson about life, something about life. And I think that many of us could go back to stories told to us by our parents or grandparents, and something we learned from them, something to teach us about life. And sometimes stories are told to help us think, to kind of probe our curiosity that, especially with children, to have them think. And so we have all kinds of reasons for telling stories. And then we have the audiences. Who do we tell stories to? We tell stories to friends, we tell stories to families, we tell stories to new people so they can get to know who we are. It's a different way of introducing ourselves by telling a story. Well, Jesus was a great storyteller. Today's gospel, just like the first and second reading, are telling stories. But Jesus is telling a story like he does many times to teach a lesson. And in the three readings today, from the stories that are told about Moses talking to God, about Paul talking to Timothy, or about Jesus talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, they're talking about a God who is loving and a God who is merciful. A God who is always loving and a God who is always merciful. And the stories tell that. In the gospel, Jesus is talking to the scribes and the Pharisees because he can tell how they are questioning the relationships that he has, the people that he associates with. And so he wants to teach them something. And he teaches them how God's love touches everybody, even the ones that are most despised by society. He teaches how God's love is for the healing of people, the bringing about people together. He teaches about how God's love is there. And so he's telling the scribes and the Pharisees this because they have another agenda. But Jesus is also talking to the disciples. He's talking to the church. And it's extremely important what Jesus is saying to us. Because he's talking about leaving the 99 and going in search of the one. To leave the 99, he's saying, leave what you have. Leave what you're sure of. And go out to the ones that are neglected. He's not saying that the 99 are not important. He's not saying to be negligent. He is saying that there are others that are out there that need you, and you must go out. He's telling the church that the church must be in mission, to be out there in search. That's what he's telling us. He's saying the church can't limit itself to its own. It can't just maintain the ones that it has and be comfortable because we have this and we have these people. He's saying that we need to go out to what is uncertain. It's just like what Francis is teaching to the church today. To go out into the streets telling the youth to mess things up. We need to go out and not merely maintain what we have. And it's not easy. It's not easy to go out there to what is uncertain, to what is lost, because we're comfortable with our own. We're comfortable with what we have. We're more secure. We're more secure. And Jesus is saying that's not the way it's supposed to be, because then it becomes like a spiritual avarice. Just being greedy with what we have and only taking care of ourselves. And he says it's kind of like worshiping that golden calf, because you're not listening to the message. And the message is to go out into the world. Saying what's going to keep the church alive, what's going to keep the church surviving, is not what we do for each other, it's serving. It's serving the other. That is going to keep the church alive and relevant when we are out there in the streets, when we're out there in the marketplace, in the squares. He tells us to open ourselves to new ways of being out there. Don't use the same things. There's got to be new ways to announce the good news. The new evangelization is calling us to that. Use new ways to reach your children, to reach other people. Go out there. He's calling us not to be afraid of leaving the 99, not to be afraid of leaving what is secure, what we know. He is saying to go out in humility to those who do not know Christ, to those who have forgotten who Christ is, to those who have left maybe because we were too into ourselves, taking care too much of ourselves, and not really seeing the need that was there. Maybe because the 99 were not really receiving the one. And he is saying, do not be afraid. It's your mission as a church, as my disciples, to go out into the world, to go out to where the others are. That's what we are to do. And it's not easy. It's not easy to leave behind what you love and your family and your friends and your nation. But we are all sent in different ways to search for the lost. Sometimes the lost is even in our own families. Sometimes the lost is even in our own church. We are all sent in search of the lost.